Growing concerns about Africa's debt risks. So many countries at the moment are close to defaulting. Some have already defaulted. From 2013 to 2022, for example, the amount of debt against African countries is increasing dramatically. What's the assessment of the UNECA on the situation?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's very important to understand the background why the high indebtedness. For the first time after the Second World War, it is the first time that we are having three shocks at the same time. We had COVID-19, which was a pandemic that we never expected, and where many countries, in addition to development, they also had to borrow to save lives, which was really not the borrowing in the normal sense. Secondly, the climate change really has become very, very serious, affecting not only the African countries, but also the other rich nations. Thirdly, the war in Ukraine that has also continued, this one had an impact on fuel costs, it had an impact on inflation, it had an impact on food costs. This has exacerbated really the debt levels on the continent. On the African continent, you have more than 20 countries that are highly indebted or in debt distress. And sooner or later, the number is increasing, and there are no alternatives in the sight. And that's why we are really looking forward to the contributing to the Summit of the Future, where they are going to discuss the reform of the international financial architecture.
There is a huge concern on climate change from the Africa side. In COP21 in Paris, there was a promise from developed states for billions of dollars to be provided for Africa for adaptation purposes. Still, that promise is not honored, but Africa continues to suffer. So what is the future holding for the continent, and also what needs to be done by developed world so that Africa can be supported?
In terms of addressing the issue of climate change, it takes the whole world to address it. And that's why there has been a lot of pressure of saying, deliver on your promise. Secondly, the loss and damage fund should be increased beyond slightly over 700 that was approved in Dubai late last year. This is an issue because some of the countries in Africa, they are already poor. They don't have room to maneuver. It does not make sense that the carbon per ton on African continent is below $10 per ton, whereas in Europe it's more than $100 for the same carbon. It does not make sense. So we are now supporting many African countries on really how to address this kind of issue, so that Africans can be able to really get the value for their own carbon. And this is very, very important.
Energy is another important issue. As you know, so many African states are trying to industrialize and their economies to transform into better shape, to add value, for instance. At the same time, the scarcity of energy is, hampering Africa's economic growth plans. What needs to be done in order to attract more investment to the energy sector, both locally and from the international community?
We cannot address the issue of energy country by country. We can only address it by regional value chain. We want to look at regions like Southern Africa, Eastern Africa, West Africa, and the rest of it, so that we address the issue of the whole entire block of the region. Because there is also the trade in energy, which is very, very important. And what we are trying to propose as ECA is coming up with a framework where we bring in the private sector by de-risking those kind of programs, but also encouraging the trade among member countries of that region so they can trade in energy. But also we are moving to the renewable energy as well, trying to see how do we bring in the private sector, how do we bring in the private independent power producers. And that means we have to put a regulatory framework of the power purchase agreement that is really very attractive, that can bring in the private sector.